Hey folks, so I wanted to talk a bit about debugging and problem-solving CSS issues. I'm sure you're all familiar with that feeling of, why is this not working? And then searching and copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow to fix the problem. And you might not understand why the code suddenly works now and just kind of move on to the next thing. But I do think that it's important to understand why the bug happened and also why your fix is now working so that if you encounter a similar problem in the future, you'll be able to fix it more quickly. So I thought it might be interesting to share with you all the actual steps that I take when I'm researching and testing fixes for a CSS bug. In this video, I'm going to show you a bug that I had a lot of trouble with when I was building my recent live coding series, a portfolio website from Front-End Mentor. If you haven't watched the videos, that's totally okay. I'll walk you through exactly what was going on. So let's take a look at the website. So here's a website, and the bug that was happening was only happening on when I did the emulated mobile view, and also happened when I was testing the local site on my actual phone. So the problem was that I discovered that there was horizontal scrolling on the website, and this is usually something that you don't want. And we can see that it looks like this circle is kind of off screen, so maybe that's having to do something with it. And if we scroll down, there's this rings image, and it looks like this is definitely causing some horizontal scrolling. So it looks like the rings image down here and then the circle image up in the top are causing this issue. So let's say I'm not familiar with horizontal scrolling and what can cause it and what can fix it. So my first step is I'm going to do some research, and I'm going to type in CSS because I like to start with the category. And then I just try to describe what the problem is. And I try to use words that I think other people are also going to be using when they're describing the problem. So I'm going to say, how do I get rid of horizontal scroll bars on mobile? Because it's only happening on the emulated mobile view. So we're going to do the search on DuckDuckGo. And the first result is a Stack Overflow post. So let's check this out. Now, when I look at Stack Overflow, I do try to check a couple things. One is how many upvotes the question has. This one has 88 upvotes, so it's almost 100, which is actually, I think, pretty good. It was asked 12 years ago, so that is kind of one thing to just watch out for because, a lot has changed in 12 years. But it says it was modified 1 month ago, so maybe it does have a more modern solution. So let's see their question. So I'm having an issue where horizontal scrolls appear on certain phones for my site. I try to put overflow X hidden, but it's not working. So this sounds kind of similar to what we're having. Horizontal scroll bars are appearing on mobile. They tried putting overflow X hidden, so this is kind of a hint that this might be a potential solution, and it's not working. So let's look at the answers. So the top answer has 140 upvotes, which is pretty good. And it says, add the CSS. So to the HTML in the body, you add overflow X hidden, and then body add position relative. Sounds pretty good. Let's check out the comments for the answers to see if this helped people. So top one says, this one is the only one that worked for me, thanks. Okay. If we look at the other ones, looks like it's okay. This should be marked as the correct answer. Thanks for sharing. And then some people had problems with it. And then the next answer looks also similar, overflow X hidden. So I think this is definitely worth trying in our own code, right? So when I'm trying different fixes, what I usually try to do is just to change one thing at a time and then recheck the website to see if the problem is still happening. So let's just copy this first style rule, HTML body overflow X hidden. I'm going to go to our styles here and let's just paste it in down here and save. And let's check our website and see if that made a difference. So refresh, and then I'm going to try my horizontal scrolling. Oh, and this is different. So before, see if we can just uncheck that rule that we added. Okay, I'm going to uncheck the overflow X hidden rule. Before, the horizontal scrolling went much farther out, all the way to the end of this rings image. But now with the overflow X hidden, if we scroll, it's only going as far as the circle. Let's check the rings image. And it looks like the rings image is actually cut off, which is kind of what you want. So that's interesting. So this fixes the horizontal scrolling for the rings, but not for the circle. So, we're definitely on the right track. let's try copying this rule and also adding it to our code. So let's find the body selector. We already have a body selector, so I'm just going to type it in. Position relative and save. And let's check our website again. Refresh. Now I'm horizontal scrolling, and I am not horizontal scrolling at all, even though I'm using my horizontal scroll wheel. So this is great. And again, we could stop here, right? Because our website is basically fixed. I think we'd have to tweak the circle positioning a little bit, but it's pretty much working. But if we want to dig a little bit deeper and spend more time understanding why overflowX hidden and adding position relative stop the horizontal scrolling for both the circle and the rings, what I'm trying to do is formulate questions that I'm trying to find the answers to. So the two questions we want to understand are, why did overflowX hidden work and only for the rings? And why was position relative additionally needed for the circle? So this is kind of where you start doing like detective work. So the things that we have to research right now are overflowX hidden, and what does that do? And maybe that's the first thing we'll start. So when I'm looking up CSS issues, I will usually try to go to MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, because they have really good documentation. So I'm going to type in MDN CSS overflowX. This is the property in question. And let's see what happens. So first result is a page on MDN overflowX. So this is what we want to look at. This is what we want to look into. So overflowX CSS property, it sets what shows when content overflows a block level element's left and right edges, which seems to be what was happening. We had the circle and the rings kind of overflowing to the right of the website. So this could be nothing, a scroll bar, or overflow content. And they have a little interactive thing here. So on the right, we have some content that's super long. It's really long text. And we have overflowX visible selected. So it's kind of overflowing the content. Let's try overflowX hidden. And that's what we added to our styles. And now you can see it's clipped. So overflowX hidden is supposed to clip it to the containing box. overflowX scroll adds scroll bars, which we don't want, obviously. And overflowX auto is, I'm assuming it will add scroll bars if necessary. So that sort of answers the question of why adding overflowX hidden worked, at least for the rings, right? However, we still don't know why position relative was needed in order for the circle to not add horizontal scroll bars. So if we go back to our website, what we want to do is to compare and simplify, because we have the circle and we have the rings image, and they seem to be kind of similar in that they're both causing horizontal scrolling because they're both kind of off screen, but they are kind of behaving differently, right? So we have a hypothesis that maybe there's something different about this circle image that makes it need to have position relative in order for the overflowX hidden to work. So let's see. Let's go back into our code here, and I'm just going to uncomment the position relative in order to force horizontal scrolling to happen. So when I have two elements that I want to look at and I'm trying to understand why they have different behavior, one thing I start with is comparing their CSS styles. So let's inspect the circle. If we go up here, we can see that it has position absolute, it has a top position of 171 pixels, it has a negative margin bottom, and then it has a translate value, which is making it move off to the right. And then let's go down to the rings. And this also has position absolute, it has a bottom and a left, and then also has a translate. So what I want to do is I'm going to try to set both those elements to have the same CSS styles so that they're position absolute, but they're also kind of going off screen. So I'm going to go up to the hero circle, and I'm going to, let's go, there we go. So I'll leave the position absolute. I might just like remove these properties because they're not really affecting the horizontal placement. So let's see what happens if we uncheck them. And then I guess it still needs to translate. So maybe we'll just use this translate value for the skills rings. So again, we're going to uncheck the properties that we don't think we need. And then let's just see. Okay, so now they're both off screen, looks like the same amount. And again, the horizontal scrolling is only happening for the circle. And the rings is still getting cut off the way that we want for the circle. So this tells us that even though the styles are the same between the two elements, there is still something different that is causing horizontal scrolling to happen for the circle. So another thing that you can look at is to compare their HTML hierarchy, like what parent and ancestor elements they have, because those might also have an effect on them. So let's look at the markup. So we have the hero circle here. It is a child of this hero content div, which is a child of hero wrapper, which is a child of the section tag with the class of hero. So then let's go down to the rings, and the rings they don't have as many parent elements. So the rings looks like a direct child of the skills section tag. So one thing we can do to try to make, again, the environment the same for both is, let's go back up to the hero circle. And this is kind of cool. You can do this in the DevTools, but I'm going to click and drag the hero circle up until it's a direct child of the hero section tag. And then let's just close this one. So now we can see that the hero section has direct child of the image, and the skills section has a direct child of the skills rings. Unfortunately, the horizontal scrolling is still happening. So putting them the same sort of level under their parent doesn't seem to have done anything. So another thing you can do when you're comparing why something's happening for one element and not the other is to simplify the markup. So again, we're just doing this in the browser. I'm going to actually delete the HTML that we don't need on the website, just to kind of simplify and isolate so that only the elements in question are going to be on the page. So I'm going to delete the header. So just select that in the source code panel and press delete. And sometimes you have to press delete twice in order for the element to actually get deleted. And in the hero section, we have the hero circle, which we want to keep, obviously. And we don't actually need this hero wrapper div, so I think I'm just going to delete that too. And then going down to the skills section, we don't need the skills wrapper, so I'm going to delete that too. Leave the skills rings. And then we don't need this project section, and we don't need this contact section, and we don't need the footer. So now this website is very simple. It only has the circle and the ring. So let's see if this made any difference. And it looks like, I'm still doing my horizontal scroll wheel, and the horizontal scrolling is still happening for the circle. So now we've simplified the website. The next thing you can check is to start checking the parent elements to see if there's any difference in their styles. So let's look at the skills section tag. And if I slide this up a little bit, we can see it has one rule of position relative, which is interesting because position relative was mentioned in that fix from Stack Overflow. So with that in mind, this might be an interesting clue. Let's check the hero section tag. And if we check the hero section tag, it doesn't have any rules. So it doesn't have position relative set. So one thing that you might want to do now is, because the difference is the skills section has position relative, let's try adding that same position relative style to the hero section. So I'm going to add a new selector, and then here I'll type in position relative. Now let's see if the scrolling is still happening. And I'm now doing my horizontal scroll wheel, and the horizontal scrolling is not happening. So that definitely tells us that position relative has some effect on making the horizontal scrolling not happen. And we can also actually test the reverse. So if our theory is that position relative is preventing horizontal scroll bars, if we go down to the skills section, and we uncheck this position relative rule, what happens? And now horizontal scrolling is happening not for the circle. You can see it's getting cut off, but it's happening for the rings. So this definitely tells us that position relative is needed in order for the overflow X to work. However, we still don't understand why this is happening. We don't understand why position relative is needed for these elements to not have horizontal scrolling. And there's something about position relative that's needed in order for the overflow X style rule to take effect. So we need to maybe go back into the styles for both these images and see if there's any style rules that, might give us some hint as to why they need position relative. So let's look at this circle first. And again, it has position absolute and translate as the two style rules. And the same way, the skills rings has position absolute and translate. So will getting rid of one or both these rules stop the horizontal overflow from happening and stop scroll bars from happening? Let's go back up to the circle, and I'm going to uncheck position absolute. So it kind of moved down because position absolute takes the element out of the normal flow of the document, which is why they're overlapping here. So if I uncheck it, it goes to position static, which is the default position property value. But more importantly, horizontal scrolling is not happening, which is interesting. Add it back in, and wait a minute. Yeah, so this is interesting because not having position absolute, overflow X is still working. We don't have horizontal scroll bars, even though the translate property is making it go off screen. So let's try the same thing for the rings. And again, right now, there's no horizontal scrolling happening. If we uncheck position absolute, will this affect anything? Let's try unchecking position relative to see if that has an effect. So unchecking position relative makes horizontal scrolling happen, which we saw earlier. And then now, if I uncheck position absolute, will that fix anything? Oh, and so now horizontal scrolling is not happening. So when we're debugging, we've kind of looked at a lot of different things, and we're kind of picking up all these different clues. So in order to kind of keep your thoughts organized, sometimes I'd like to write down what I know in order to kind of help me in my research and trying to figure out what the solution is. So what we know right now is that overflow X hidden prevents horizontal scrolling of position absolute elements if their parent section tag is set to position relative. And overflow X hidden doesn't work to prevent horizontal scrolling if the parent section tag doesn't have position relative. So you need the position relative rule on the parent element in order for the child element, the skills rings and the hero circle, which have position absolute, to not have horizontal scrolling. And overflow X hidden will work if the elements don't have position absolute set. So, unchecking position absolute, there's no horizontal scrolling. If we add it back in, there is horizontal scrolling because we don't have position relative. But if we check position relative, then again, horizontal scrolling doesn't happen. So this is kind of leading us to another thing that we can research, position absolute, and what effect that might or might not be having with the overflow X hidden rule, either working or not working. So again, we're going to do some search on MDN. And I'm going to say MDN CSS position absolute. Okay, so the first result is a position article. So let's check this out. And there's different values that you can set on position. So I'm actually going to do a search in the page with Control F and look for absolute. And here is the section on position absolute. So this says, the element is removed from normal document flow. No space is created for the element in the page layout. It is positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor, if any. Otherwise, it is placed relative to the initial containing block. And then its final position is determined by the values of top, right, bottom, and left. So documentation can be kind of dense. So this sentence here seems to be important. It is positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor, if any. But what does that really mean? What is the closest positioned ancestor? What makes it positioned versus not positioned? So fortunately, this is a link, so let's check this out. So this article says types of positioning. A positioned element is an element whose computed position value is either relative, absolute, fixed, or sticky. In other words, anything except static. And static is a default value of the position property. And if you didn't know that, you could look up static on this page and just see what it says. It says here, position static, the element is positioned according to the normal flow of the document. These properties have no effect. This is the default value. So let's go back to, I think we were we looking up position absolute? Okay. So again, a positioned element means the position value has been set to something other than the default value of static. So that makes me think of how we set position relative on the parent section tag, which sort of fixed things, right? So let's go back up to the absolute paragraph. Okay, so an absolute element is positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor. So the closest positioned ancestor would be the section tag if it's position relative. Otherwise, so if it doesn't have an ancestor that has position set to something other than static, it is going to be placed relative to the initial containing block. So again, we don't really know what this is. So let's discover what the initial containing block is. Go to this link. So you can kind of scan the first paragraph just to see what this is about. Size and position of an element are often impacted by its containing block. Content area of an element's nearest block level ancestor. Okay, so what does that really mean? Let's look up initial containing block. Okay, so here's a section here. The containing block in which the root element, HTML, resides is a rectangle called the initial containing block. It has the dimensions of the viewport or the page area. So this tells us that the initial containing block is the block that contains the HTML tag, which is like the root of the entire website, and it's as big as a viewport. So if we go back to our position absolute page, this sort of tells us that if the element, which is position absolute, doesn't have an ancestor that has position explicitly set to something, it will then position itself in relation to the container of the root HTML element. So according to the docs, this means that the circle is positioning itself in relation to the initial containing block if we don't have position relative set on the section tag. And if it's the containing block of the actual HTML, which if we look here, this is like the whole website. So that kind of makes me think that it's outside of the HTML in a way, because it said the initial containing block is what contains the HTML tag. So it's even going kind of outside of that. So that makes me think that if this is happening, it's going to be, the element is going to be outside of where we set the overflow x hidden rule, which means that it's not going to have any effect because we set overflow x hidden on the body and the HTML tags. And if it's going outside of that, then those rules are not going to take effect on it. So if we go back to section hero, it has position relative set, which means the hero circle will position itself in relation to the section tag. And if we uncheck it, then the circle is going to position itself in relation to the initial containing block outside of the overflow x hidden rule. And you can see that the horizontal scrolling is happening. So, this is a good way of telling us that we can kind of make an educated guess here that when you have an element with position absolute, you do need to set position relative on a parent. Otherwise, weird things can happen, like, it floats up all the way to the initial containing block, and it makes rules like overflow x hidden not work. So this tells us that we maybe want to update our code and set position relative on the hero section, and then make sure that we have overflow x hidden added on the body and HTML tags. So this looks like a good solution. So we have overflow x hidden set on HTML and body. And then I just want to find the hero. It looks like we don't have a selector for just the hero class section tag. So add one there. And then I'll say position relative. And now we're going to save. And now, since we think this is the solution, we're going to refresh the website, and it's going to load everything that we had before. So all the deleted elements from the HTML are going to come back. So let's do a refresh. And now we have the website. So you can immediately see that there's some problems here. There's like a ton of extra space up here in the hero. But what we want to check right now is if horizontal scrolling is happening. So let's scroll down to the circle and let's check our horizontal scroll wheel, and it's not happening. So it looks like we have fixed the initial horizontal scroll bars bug. And then, so it looks like that's fixed. Now, sometimes fixing one bug is going to cause another bug to happen. So this is just kind of what happens. So we do want to now troubleshoot this new bug and find a solution for that, and hopefully not create any new bugs in the process. Now, the problem that we have here is that we have way too much space up here. It looks like the hero image and the SVGs are much farther down than they should be. So what we need to do is actually look at the design so we know what, the ideal thing is going to be. So here I have the Figma design file from Front Mentor. And since this is a mobile problem, we're just going to zoom in on the mobile view here. So now we can compare the design with the actual website. The main thing is that we need to move up the image and the SVGs. The text looks like it's okay. We need to find out why this space is happening. So what I do when I'm trying to figure out where, a space is happening or something else is happening is go to the source code. And if you hover over elements, Firefox is going to sort of highlight them. And it can highlight the box model. So like the margin padding and things like that. So we're just going to start from the top. So section class hero is here. And then we have the hero wrapper. Let's expand this. Hero content. Let's expand that too. This is the picture, which contains the hero image. And then we got the hero rings, hero circle, and hero text. Oh, and this looks like it has a really large margin top. Margin block start 335 pixels. It's the same thing as margin top. It's just kind of a new way of doing it. So I'm trying to use margin block start and end instead of margin top and bottom. But just know it's the same thing as margin top. So the hero text has a large margin on the top. So let's uncheck it and see what happens. All right, so if we uncheck it, all the content in the hero moves up. So the image and also the text. And this is kind of weird because the margin is set on this hero text div. For some reason, it's affecting everything in the hero. So the hero text is a sibling element of the circle, the rings, and then the image. And it's in this hero content div. But for some reason, the margin is affecting everything in the hero. So that's kind of weird because, hero content doesn't have a margin top set. So this is a new problem that we now have to kind of restart the whole process over and do some research. So I'm going to open a new tab. And again, I'm going to say CSS, the category, and I want to describe the problem. So what's happening? The problem is that the margin top from one div is affecting its parent. like the margins going outside the parent, which is really weird. So I try to use terms that, again, I think other people are going to use. So child, parent and child, is a pretty common term. And then child margin affecting parent. So let's see what happens. Okay, so again, the top result is a Stack Overflow post. So let's check this out. So a couple things about this. It was asked 13 years ago, which is pretty old, so we need to kind of keep that in mind. But it was modified about a year ago, which is good because that means hopefully the solution is more modern. This has 495 upvotes, which is a ton. If you remember, the previous Stack Overflow question we were looking at for our other bug had less than 100 upvotes. So 495, it's a pretty good sign that the answer for this question is going to be a good one. So again, let's look at the question and see how similar it is to our problem. So this person says, I have a div parent that contains another div child. Parent is the first element in the body with no particular CSS. But when I set the child element to have a margin top of 10 pixels, the end result is that the top of my child is still aligned with the parent. Instead of the child being shifted for 10 pixels downwards, my parent moves 10 pixels down. So this is actually exactly what's happening with us. We have that top margin in the hero text. It's affecting the parent, which contains not just the hero text, but also all the images. So it looks like a lot of people are having the same problem. Who writes these rules? This rule seriously bugs me. So let's look at the answer. This was marked as a solution. So this one has 583 upvotes, which is great. So you can add parent overflow auto or parent overflow hidden. This prevents the margins to collapse. Border and padding do the same. You can also use the following to prevent a top margin collapse. So adding a padding top of 1 pixel or a margin top and a margin top of -1 pixel, I guess, to balance it out. But then this is interesting. At the bottom, it says 2021 update. If you're willing to drop IE11 support, which I guess we don't need to worry about too much, you can use a new CSS construct, display flow root. Okay, so this is a very interesting and informative answer. So there's two things that kind of stick out to me when I'm reading this. The first thing is that this prevents the margins to collapse. So that's one thing that we might want to kind of look into. And then the other thing is the 2021 update using display flow root. So that's another thing. That's another thing that we can kind of look up. So let's look up margin collapse on MDN. So MDN, CSS, margin collapse. And there's an article on this, mastering margin collapsing. Okay, so it says the top and bottom margins of blocks are sometimes combined or collapsed into a single margin whose size is the largest of the individual margins, or just one of them if they're equal, a behavior known as margin collapsing. And then it tells us when margin collapse occurs. Adjacent siblings, no content separating parent and descendants, which might be similar to our case because we have a parent and descendant issue. If there is no border, padding, inline part, block formatting context created, or clearance to separate the margin top of a block from the margin top of one or more of its descendant blocks, or no border, padding, inline content to separate the margin bottom from the margin bottom. Okay, so we're kind of concerned more with margin top. So no content separating parent and descendants. Is that what's happening here? So the hero text is here. And I guess, even though there is stuff here, because hero circle is position absolute, it's taken out of the flow of the document. So it basically is like it doesn't exist on the page. The website doesn't make any room for it. Same thing with hero rings, position absolute, doesn't take up any space. And the image is also position absolute. So even though there's 3 images between hero text and the parent hero content, because they're all position absolute, they're not taking up any space. So my guess is that the browser sees this as there is no content separating, the hero text from its parent. So this seems to be the reason why the top margin of hero text is going outside of the parent. Okay, so this is what is happening, margin collapse. So let's go back to our answer. So it seems like the answer is saying adding these certain rules to the parent will, prevent margin collapse from happening. So let's just try this display flow root solution. And I'm assuming we have to add it to the parent since that's where all the other styles were added. So we want to add it to the parent of hero text, which is hero content. So let's just try this in the browser. So hero content and then display flow root. Oh, and it looks like that worked. So now the hero text margin is not going outside the parent, but it's inside, it's sort of limited to inside the parent. So that seems pretty good. And we do need to kind of tweak the other images in the hero. It looks like they're still a little bit down from where they should be. But I feel like that's a bit more minor and we can tackle that a little bit later. So display flow root did fix our problem. And again, we could sort of leave it as is and just kind of move on and fix the hero images. But if you have the time, let's try to do some research. So again, we'll say MDN, CSS, and let's look at display flow root to find out more about what this is and what it does. Okay, so the first result is the display article. And I guess there'll be a section in here for display flow root. Let's look up flow root. And yes, there's a paragraph here. So the element generates a block element box that establishes a new block formatting context, defining where the formatting root lives. Again, it's kind of dense. There's a couple things that I'm curious about. The main one is, what is a block formatting context? So let's just read this link. Okay, so this is telling us a block formatting context is a part of a visual CSS rendering of a web page. It's the region in which the layout of block boxes occurs and in which floats interact with other elements. Okay, and then if we look down a bit, it tells us how block formatting contexts are created. So it looks like a lot of them can create block formatting contexts. Root element, floats, absolutely positioned elements, inline blocks, table cells, and so on. There's a lot. And oh, this is interesting. Display flow root is mentioned. So setting display flow root creates a new block formatting context. So just from this, again, it's maybe kind of hard to understand, but it seems like they're saying that the block formatting context, is kind of the layout of the different boxes on the web page, and it has something to do with how the elements on a page are displayed visually. So the other question I have, I think, is in this sentence, it's the region in which the layout of block boxes occurs. What is a block box? So again, let's do another search. I guess I'll just go in a new tab. Search for MDN, CSS, block boxes. So hopefully you can kind of see the process that I'm doing here. So like I'm researching a problem, trying to describe what's happening. Then I read the documentation. And then if I don't understand what the documentation is saying, I look up the phrases or the words in the docs to understand what those words are. So it's kind of like you're learning new vocabulary with these new terms. So in this search, we're trying to figure out what block boxes means. The top result is a CSS box model, which sounds like, maybe this will explain a little bit better. Okay, so this says the CSS box model is a module of CSS that defines the rectangular boxes, including their padding and margin, that are generated for elements and laid out according to the visual formatting model. Okay, so this is telling us that how these rectangular boxes are created for elements. And the familiar parts of this are padding and margin, because you can set padding and margin on every element on a page. So we can kind of make another educated guess and guess that the block boxes are elements on the page, and the block formatting context is how these elements are displayed on the web page, and how padding and margin and border kind of play into it. Which does actually make sense, because with our issue of margin collapse, setting display flow root kind of fixed our margin going outside the parent problem. All right, so now that we understand a little bit more of what's happening, let's go ahead and add that display flow root rule to our actual code. So going back to our website, we'd added it to the hero content selector. So I'm just going to copy the rule, go into VS Code, and looks like we don't have one for hero content, so I'm going to add it under hero wrapper if there is one. Okay, here we go, hero wrapper. So hero content display flow root. So now let's refresh and see if our change had an effect. And yes, it looks like the images in the hero are now moved up, and we don't have that huge space for the images. It's only for the text. So what we need to do now is add some more tweaks to make sure that this matches our design. You can see here the hero image needs to be flush at the very top of the website. And right here, it is not. It's more down. So you can see it looks like the hero image is right below the header. And the hero itself starts under the header. So we actually need to move the image up sort of where the header is. So let's see how to do that best. So if we look at the style rules for hero image, right now it's positioned absolute and a top of 0, which means it's going to be positioned at the very top of the parent. And the hero, again, is here. So let's just I'm going to add an outline so it's easier to see. Outline 2 pixel solid red. So this is the top edge of the hero, and the image is here. And we want to move the image up above that red line to the very top of the website. So what we can do is adjust the top to be negative, which means the top property is how many pixels down from the top edge of the parent the element is. So if we have it negative, it's going to be above the top edge of the parent. So we could just kind of eyeball this, and let's add an outline to that too. 1 pixel solid lime. Let's make that 2 so you can see it more easily. All right, so we got this green outline, and if we wanted to, we could just kind of eyeball this and bring it up. But another way we can do that is going back to top 0. We need to bring it up the exact height of the header. So if we can find out what the height of the header is, we can add that to our top value. So here, the header, and it says 68 pixels over here. And if I go to the layout tab, it's actually going to tell us a bit more details. So this is saying it's 68 pixels of content and then 20 pixels of margin. So the total height is going to be the content plus the margin, so 88 pixels. So then if we go back to our image, we can set top to negative 88 pixels. And it'll be exactly the top. So that seems pretty good. So let's just copy this, and we'll set hero image instead of top 0, negative 88 pixels. So we'll save that. And then now if we refresh, the image looks like it's in the right position according to the design. So yeah. So now we also need to adjust the rings image and maybe the circle image. The circle image actually seems pretty good. So maybe you make it level with the image. Let's check out the circle since it's almost correct. So the hero circle, looks like the top is just set to a pixel width. So I think maybe the best way would just be to adjust that top. And again, if we wanted to, we could try to do some math, but I kind of just eyeball things sometimes. So 166 pixels. And I actually don't think we need this. This doesn't seem to be doing anything. This we do need. So maybe I'll set top to 166 and then remove that margin bottom because I think it was there for something else. But I think with the changes that we added to the circle, we don't need that anymore. So top is going to be, what was it again? 166. And then remove the margin bottom. And let's just refresh that. So again, I'm making one change and then refreshing the website to see how it looks. And this looks pretty good. Now the rings image up here, it's much higher than it is on our website. And it looks like the top is slightly above the top of the head. So we can try to kind of eyeball that too. Here are rings. And it too is set to this. So what if we can set a, yeah, I guess this is fine. So we'll just kind of eyeball this. So the top is a little bit above the head. So it seems pretty good. So top of 38 pixels for the hero rings. $38 pixels, I think it was. Yeah, 38 pixels. And I might just kind of clean up the code a bit here. These are all commented out and I don't think we need them anymore. And now we refresh and it looks pretty good. So let's again look at the design and just see how good it looks. So, and this is kind of silly, but I like to try to make these positioned the same. So it's more easy to see any differences. But that looks really good. So now since we made these changes, and again, this was just on mobile, so we kind of need to do our due diligence and check on other viewport widths. So right now we have iPhone 11 selected. Let's try iPad. So let's look at the design for the tablet version. And it looks like the image here is a little bit different. Yeah, it looks like it's a bit up too high. So let's inspect that. Yeah, it looks like it's kind of cut off. So how did that happen? So there's no top set. So I'm wondering. Okay, this might be why. So the parent of the image is display flex. So that means that the children, which is the image and the hero text, are going to be aligned using Flexbox. And it's set align items to center. So I think that's why the image is like that, because the hero text has this margin top. So I think it's kind of affecting stuff. So I wonder if we can do for tablet line items start. I'm not sure if that's what we need. So first let's fix the image and then we'll have to adjust the text as well. So the image is here. So let's try adding a top of 0 and see if that does anything. Okay. So I think before just kind of maybe centering it. Adding top 0 now, it looks a lot better actually. So let's add top of 0 to hero image 4. And for the tablet styles, I have them in this media query 37.5 EMs. So hero image. And we're going to look in our medium media query. That's the desktop one. Okay, this is 37.5. So again, I'm just going to delete this. And I'll add top, here, top of 0. So again, I made one change, I'm saving, and then now let's refresh the website. Okay, so the image looks a lot better. Let's see the text. So it looks like the bottom of the text kind of aligns with the bottom of the image. I think this is kind of close enough because I think the text here in the hero is going to be either 2 lines or 3 lines, depending on the viewport. So we may not be able to get exact. So I think this is good enough for the hero content. Let's just check the rings and the circle again. So for tablet, the circle is aligned to the bottom of the image. And the rings is kind of aligned with the nice word. So the circle does need to be moved. So it's set to 190 pixels from the bottom of the parent. So I wonder what would happen if I set bottom to 0. Okay, so the bottom edge is here. I'm guessing it's like including the padding or something. Yeah. So maybe we can fix this with translate. So if translate 50% is moving it to the right. So let's do a negative 50% for the vertical. And then that should work. Looks like it's slightly off still. So this is kind of hacky, but okay, so we'll just try this for our tablet styles for the hero circle. And replace that and save and then refresh. Good. And now the rings. So let's just make sure the text is correct also. So it's like the text kind of top edge is just under the top of the head. So it's a little bit high. So it looks like there's a margin block start. So maybe we can just adjust that a little bit. If you hold down shift while doing up or down arrow, it'll move by 10 instead of 1 pixel. So actually, I think the rings are okay. So let's just align the text with the rings image. That seems pretty good. And now it looks actually like the bottom is also aligned with the photo, which is great. So hero text set margin block start to 155. And again, let's delete this comment. Save and refresh. Cool. So again, let's check the design. Looks like it's pretty close. The image is here. Circles at the very bottom. Rings is on the nice word. So I think it looks pretty good. I think we're good for that. Let's also go back to iPhone and check. That looks pretty good. And then now let's check desktop. And I think that looks good. Let's check the design, of course. So the circle is kind of near the bottom, sort of where the shoulder hits the edge. And the rings are still kind of aligned with a nice word. So it looks like this is good. The circle is maybe can move down a little bit. So let's try that. Here we go. Circle. So there's just a little bit of like that, I think. Maybe a little bit more down. Okay, so that seems pretty good. So top of 383 for the hero circle on our desktop breakpoint. Here's our desktop breakpoint in the code. Hero circle. So we'll save that and check. Okay, so circle looks good. Text looks good too, I think. And the rings can maybe move down just a tiny little bit. If I can find it. Here, hero rings. Top of 0. So we'll just kind of move it down. So hero rings on desktop, top of 6 pixels. There we go. All right, so we'll save that, refresh, and looks pretty good. So now, and you know, we try to make things close to the design when we can, but we can't control everything. So I think this looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think we are all set in terms of the bug fixing and everything. So I hope that this video was helpful for you and just showing you the steps that I take when I'm debugging CSS issues. So again, it's like I do a search and I try to describe the problem. Then I look at the search results, which are often Stack Overflow posts. And then I also do try to read the documentation on MDN. And then when I do fixes, I put them in one at a time and check the website after each one to see if each individual possible fix has had an effect. And then just trying to do some additional research to understand any words or phrases that I don't fully understand myself. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, just leave a comment and let me know what you thought, and we'll see you in the next one.